Welcome. Tonight, we step away from the clamor of the city streets, away from the crowded piazza and the narrow, shadowed alleys, and into a different kind of space, entirely space bounded by ancient stone and profound silence. We enter a Renaissance garden, but let us be clear about what kind of garden this is. This is not the grand, geometrically perfect pleasure garden of a prince, with its elaborate fountains, its mythological statues imported from Rome, its carefully clipped hedges forming intricate knots and labyrinths. That garden existed, certainly, and it spoke of wealth, power, and the human desire to impose order upon nature. But it is not our destination tonight. Instead, we enter a smaller, more intimate, more necessary space. This is the walled kitchen and medicinal garden of a modest monastery, or the tucked-away plot behind the home of an apothecary or a prosperous merchant. Its walls are not for show. They are for protection against wandering animals, against the chill wind, against the prying eyes of the curious. Within these walls, a different kind of wealth is cultivated, the wealth that sustains the body, heals the sick, flavors the pottage, and soothes the troubled soul. This garden has a dual purpose, as old as humanity itself. First, it exists to sustain, to provide vegetables for the table, herbs for the kitchen, fruits for preserves, and medicinal plants for the still room. Second, it exists to soothe, to offer a place of quiet contemplation, of sensory delight, of connection to the cycles of life that are larger and more patient than our own. Here, time is measured not by the anxious ticking of a clock or the insistent ringing of a bell. Time is measured by germination, by the first unfurling of a seed leaf, by flowering, the slow opening of a bud into a perfect blossom, by the gradual swelling of fruit on the vine, by the slow, sweet, inevitable rot of autumn when leaves turn and fall and compost back into the earth from which they came. The gardener does not consult a schedule. He consults the sky, the soil, and the plants themselves, our guide through this quiet, cyclical world is the gardener himself. He is not a young man. His back is familiar with a morning ache that comes from decades of bending over beds and rows. His hands are a map of his labor, etched with soil that no amount of washing can fully remove. The nails bordered in permanent black from years of working the earth. He moves slowly, deliberately, with the economy of motion that comes from a lifetime of practice. He does not lecture or philosophize aloud. He is not a humanist scholar composing treatises on the soul. His thoughts are as quiet as the growth he tends, as wordless as the opening of a flower. He thinks in actions, in observations, in the language of touch and smell and patient waiting. He knows that a garden cannot be rushed, that growth happens at its own pace. and that the gardener's highest skill is the art of patient attendance. We will follow him through the turning of a single year, from the sleeping, frozen earth of deep winter to the abundant, drowsy heat of high summer, and then through the gradual, golden letting go of autumn, back to the restful dark of winter once more. We will witness the full, sacred cycle of death and rebirth, of labor and reward, of planting and harvest. This a story of patient partnership with the soil. It is not a story of dramatic events, but of quiet, cumulative moments, the color of a new leaf unfurling in the morning light, the sharp, green scent of crushed lavender between the fingers, the satisfying weight of a ripe gourd resting in the palm of the hand. It is a history of quiet nourishment, of the slow, steady work that turns a bare plot of earth into a place of life and healing. So, let us push open the heavy wooden door set into the sun-warmed stone wall. It creaks slightly on its iron hinges, a sound that has been heard 1,000 times before by 1,000 different hands. Let us step across the threshold and enter the green and growing world within. Winter, the sleeping map, and the planning mind inside the walls. The world is utterly hushed. The garden beds, so riotous with life in summer, are now bare, brown, and deeply orderly. A light frost silvers the edges of the stone paths. The fruit trees, their leaves long fallen, stand as silent skeletons against the pale winter sky. The compost heap in the corner steams faintly in the cold air, its internal heat a reminder that life continues. Even in apparent death, the gardener walks the frosted paths, not to work, for there is little to be done in the frozen ground, but to remember and to plan. His footsteps crunch softly on the frozen gravel. He pauses at each bed, his eyes tracing its outline, his mind recalling what grew there in the season past, and considering what might grow there in the season to come. In his hand, he carries a worn wooden tablet, its surface smooth from years of use. With a simple iron stylus, he scratches notes into the wax coating. This is his map, his memory. He sketches the layout of the garden, dividing the space in his mind with the precision of a military strategist planning a campaign. Here, he thinks, his stylus marking a bed along the south-facing wall. The peas will go. They like the early sun, the warmth reflected from the stone. They will be the first to climb there. In the corner where the wall casts its longest shadow, the shade-loving herbs for the infirmary, the violets for soothing syrups, the comfrey for poultices to heal broken bones and bruised flesh, the sweet woodruff for flavoring wine and calming the nerves. Here, the onions, for they deter pests. There, the cabbages, which need space to spread their broad leaves. Here, the carrots, their feathery tops dancing in the summer breeze. His planning is not merely practical. It is a form of meditation. In the quiet of winter, when the garden is only a memory and a promise, he is already living in the future, imagining the green that will come, the shed, a workshop of patience when the cold becomes too sharp, or when his planning is done, he retreats to the small stone shed at the garden's northern edge. This is his second domain, a space of tools and treasures. The shed smells of earth, of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, of old wood and iron. Here, in the quiet, he is busy with the slow work of maintenance. He picks up a spade whose handle has cracked over the summer's hard use. He selects a piece of ash wood, roughly shaped, and begins the patient work of fitting it, shaving off thin curls with a draw knife, testing the fit, shaving a little more. The work is slow, repetitive, deeply satisfying. He sharpens his blades on a smooth, gray wet stone, kept in a pot of water. The rhythmic hiss-hiss of steel against stone is a soothing sound. He tests each blade's edge against his thumb, feeling for the perfect, invisible sharpness that will slice through soil and root with ease. And then the seeds, in little clay pots, each carefully labeled in his own simple, unlettered hand, for he may not read Latin. But he knows his plant by sight and smell and story. He keeps the promise of next year. He opens each pot, pours a few seeds into his palm, and examines them. They are tiny, dry, seemingly lifeless. He holds them to his nose and smells them. Even in their dormant state, they hold the ghost of their future scentha, sharpness of dill, the sweetness of fennel, the earthy pungency of cumin. He sorts them, discarding any that are shriveled or damaged, counting the good ones, planning how many rows they will fill. This is the garden of the mind, as vital as the one that'll soon burst into green life outside the shed door. The real labor now is not physical. It is the labor of faith. Faith in the tiny, dry sliver of life nestled in each seed, waiting for its signal. Faith that the sun will return, that the rain will fall, that the soil will warm, and that the miracle of germination will occur once again, as it has for millennia. As it will for millennia to come. The deep of winter, a time of true rest, there comes. A point in deepest winter, when even the planning must pause. The ground is frozen iron-hard. Snow may cover the beds in a thick, white blanket, muffling all sound. The gardener stays mostly indoors, by his own hearth, tending the fire, mending his clothes, perhaps reading a devotional text, or simply sitting and watching the flames. This is the garden's true fallow time, and his own. It is a time of rest, of hibernation, of gathering strength for the burst of energy that spring will demand. He knows, with the deep wisdom of his calling, that rest is not emptiness. It is preparation. The earth is not dead. It is dreaming. And in his dreaming, the gardener joins it. The first signs, the thaw, then, almost imperceptibly, a change. The quality of the light shifts. The sun, even on a cold day, feels slightly warmer on the skin. The snow begins to melt, retreating from the base of the wall, first revealing dark, damp earth. The sound of dripping water replaces the silence. The gardener feels it in his bones before he sees it with his eyes, softening. A loosening, a sense of something stirring. He walks the paths again, but differently now. He is not planning. He is watching. He kneels, his old knees protesting, and presses his hand into the damp earth. It yields, just slightly. He brings a handful to his nose. The smell is profound, rich, and cool, the smell of life returning, of dormant seeds stirring, of worms beginning to stretch in their dark tunnels. Spring, the first green, and the ritual of a waking end. Then, one morning, it happens. He walks into the garden and stops. There, in a bed along the south wall, a single spear of green has pierced the dark loam. It might be a brave, slightly tipsy tulip, its bud tightly furled. It might be a spike of chive, its thin leaves already fragrant when bruised. It is small, fragile, and utterly miraculous. The season has begun. Now, the gardener's days become a liturgy of bending and rising, a sacred ritual repeated daily. He takes his broad forca tool with thick iron tines, begins to turn the earth. He drives it into the soil with his foot, leans back, and lifts. The soil breaks apart, releasing its cool, mineral scent. He works slowly, methodically, turning each row, breaking up the clods with his hands, removing stones and the roots of persistent weeds. This is the foundation of all that will follow. Without this patient preparation, nothing can grow. The planting, a delicate trust when the soil is ready, when it is fine and crumbly and warm, the planting begins. The gardener works from his stored seeds, now organized by need and season. He draws shallow furrows in the earth with the corner of his hoe. He walks along them, his fingers pinching out the tiny seeds, dropping them at intervals measured by instinct rather than rule. He plants with a touch that is both firm and gentle, covering each seed with soil as if tucking a child into bed for the night. He murmurs as he works, not quite words, but sounds a quiet acknowledgement of the trust. He is placing in these tiny vessels of life. He plants by signs that modern minds have forgotten. He plants by the moonroot crops in the dark of the moon, leafy crops in the light. He plants by old rhymes passed down through generations. Sow peas and beans in the wane of the moon. Who soweth them sooner? He soweth too soon. He plants by the feeling in the air, by the behavior of birds, by the direction of the wind. He is not superstitious. He is attuned, reading the subtle language of the natural world that speaks to those who know how to listen. He plants quick radishing, lettuce beside slow-growing carrots, knowing they will be harvested before the carrots need the space. He plants marigolds among the tomatoes, trusting their pungent scent to deter pests. He plants borage near the strawberries, believing it improves their flavor. These are not scientific facts, but they are the accumulated wisdom of generations, and he trusts them. The waiting and the watching after the planting comes the hardest part for any gardener, the waiting. Every morning he walks the paths, scanning the bare earth for the first signs of green. He waters gently when the soil seems dry, using water from the rain barrel that has collected the winter's rains and warmed in the spring sun. He watches for birds that might scratch up the newly planted seeds, and scatters old netting where needed. Then, one day, the first seedlings appear. They are tiny, fragile, almost invisible at first, just a hint of green against the brown. But each day they grow, strengthening, reaching for the sun. The gardener spends long moments just watching them, kneeling on the path, his face close to the earth, as if he could see the growth happening before his eyes. He cannot, of course. Growth is too slow for that. But he can witness its evidence, and that is enough. The rhythm of spring, tending the new life as more and more seedlings emerge. The gardener's work expands. He must thin the rows, pulling out the weaker seedlings to give the stronger ones room to grow. This feels cruel, but he knows it is necessary. He must weed constantly, removing the wild, opportunistic plants that would otherwise choke his cultivated ones. The weeding is endless. There is no final victory over weeds, only a continuous, patient campaign. He mulches between the rows with straw, conserving moisture and suppressing weeds. He watches for pests, caterpillars, aphids, slugs, and removes them by hand. A slow, meticulous task. He props up plants that are leaning, ties vines to their stakes with soft twine. His days are full, but they are full of small, quiet, repetitive tasks. There is no rush, only the steady rhythm of care. The garden's first gifts, early harvests even as the main garden grows. The first gifts arrive. The chives, which were among the first to appear, are now lush enough to cut. Their mild onion scent fills the kitchen when the housewife adds them to the spring pottage. The radishes, planted in the first warm spell, are ready, small, round, crisp, and spicy. The gardener pulls one, wipes it on his sleeve, and bites into it. The flavor explodes in his mouth, sharp and clean, the taste of spring itself. The lettuce, too, is ready for cutting. He takes a sharp knife and cuts the outer leaves, leaving the heart to continue growing. He gathers them in his basket, their leaves still sparkling with morning dew. These early harvests are not abundant, but they are precious. They are the first fruits of the year's labor, a promise of the abundance to come. The progress of spring, from bare earth to lush green week by week, the garden transforms. The bare brown earth is slowly covered by a spreading carpet of green. The peas climb their twiggy supports, tendrils reaching out and grasping. The beans unfurl their broad, hopeful leaves. The carrots send up their feathery tops. The onions stand in neat, soldierly rows. The cabbages begin to form their tight, pale hearts. The gardener watches this transformation with quiet satisfaction. He is not its author, but its facilitator. He provided the conditions, and the life did the rest. His role is to tend, to protect, to encourage, but the growing is done by forces far older and more powerful than he. High summer, the flourishing tangle by midsummer. The garden has become a tapestry of unruly, exuberant green. It is not a picture of strict, geometric control. That was never the goal. It is a picture of vigorous, negotiated life, of plant competing and cooperating, of abundance spilling over every boundary. The honeysuckle that climbs the old wall is now in full flower, its sweet scent drifting on the warm air. The tomato vines, tied to their sturdy stakes, hang heavy with green orbs that will slowly ripen to red and gold. The bean plants are so thick you cannot see the supports beneath them. The zucchini, as they call them, spread their vast leaves across the ground, hiding their fruits beneath. The sound of the garden in summer is the sound of bees. They drone in the flowering time, in the lavender, in the borage. They move from flower to flower with focused purpose, their humming a constant, soothing undertone. Butterflies drift by cabbage whites, peacocks, tortoise shells, sighting silent flashes of color. Birds visit the bird bath, splashing and chirping. The gardener's summer work, management, not creation, the gardener's work has changed with the season. It is no longer about planting and establishing. Now it is about managing this benevolent explosion of life. He pinches back the herbs basil, mint, oregano too, encourage bushiness and prevent them from flowering too soon. He guides the wandering pumpkin vines, gently lifting them and redirecting them toward open ground. He ties up wayward tomato branches that threaten to break under their own weight. He waters in the deep evening when the sun is low and the heat has moderated. He fills his watering can from the rain barrel and walks slowly through the garden, pouring water at the base of each plant. The water soaks in, darkening the soil. The droplets cling to leaves like diamonds in the low, golden sun. This is a time of profound peace, the heat of the day done, the cool of evening approaching, the daily harvest, the garden's gifts. Every day now, the garden gives. The gardener cuts lettuces with a sharp knife, their stems bleeding a milky sap. He gathers handfuls of beans, their pods snapping crisply. He picks zucchini, checking under the huge leaves each day to ensure none have grown to the size of clubs overnight. He gathers baskets of herbs, sage, rosemary, thyme, oregano, basil. Their scents mingle on his hands, creating a dizzying, complex perfume that lingers for hours. He brings them to the kitchen, where they will flavor the day's meals or be hung to dry for winter use. And then, the greatest pleasure of the summer garden, he eats. A sun-warmed strawberry, picked at the perfect moment of ripeness. Its flavor so intense, it seems to hold the whole season in a single, sweet bite. A cherry tomato, popped into the mouth while still warm from the sun, its flavor exploding like a tiny, savory bomb. A leaf of sorrel, its sharp, lemony taste awakening the palate. These are not meals. They are moments, small communions with the living garden, the garden's microcosm. Life within life. If one sits quietly in the summer garden, one begins to perceive its hidden dimensions. It is not just a collection of plants. It is an entire ecosystem, a world within a world. Beneath the soil, unseen, earthworms are constantly working, aerating the earth, creating channels for water and air. In the compost heap, millions of microorganisms are breaking down the kitchen scraps and garden waste, transforming them into rich, dark humus. On the leaves, tiny insects, saphids, mites, caterpillars go about their own lives. Some as pests, others as predators of pests. Spiders spin their intricate webs between stems, waiting for unwary flies. A toad, living under a stone near the water barrel, emerges at dusk to hunt slugs. A hedgehog, visiting from beyond the walls, snuffles through the undergrowth, also seeking slugs and snails. The garden is a community, a web of relationships far more complex than the gardener can fully comprehend. He is part of it, but he does not control it. He is its steward, its most influential member, but not its master. The midday pause, siesta in the shade, in the heat of midday. When the sun is directly overhead and the shadows are shortest, even the gardener pauses. He finds a spot in the shade, beneath the fig tree, perhaps, or against the cool north wall. He sits on an upturned pot or a flat stone. He drinks from a jug of water, slightly warmed by the sun. He does not sleep, but he rests, his eyes half closed, his body still. This is the hour of the garden's own siesta. The bees are less frantic. The birds are silent. The plants seem to droop slightly, conserving moisture, waiting for the cooler hours. The gardener's rest is part of the garden's rest. He is not separate from it. He is part of its rhythm, the quiet apothecary, flowers for the body and spirit, one corner of the garden. A section is set apart, marked perhaps by a low hedge of box or a row of stones. This is the physic garden, the apothecary's corner, where plants are grown not for the kitchen but for the still room, for healing rather than sustenance. Here grows the chamomile, its daisy-like flowers bobbing cheerfully on slender stems. When dried and steeped in hot water, they make a tea that calms the nerves and invites sleep. The gardener tends them with particular care, knowing that their power is not just in their pleasant scent, but in their ability to soothe a troubled mind. Here grows the lavender, its purple spikes humming with bees on summer afternoons. Its flowers, distilled, yields an oil that cleans wounds and calms burns. Dried and sewn into sachets, they scent linens and keep moths at bay. The gardener cuts the spikes just as the first flowers open, tying them in loose bunches and hanging them from the rafters of his shed, where their scent will slowly infuse the dim space with the essence of summer health. Here grows the rosemary, an evergreen shrub with needle-like leaves and a pungent, piney scent. Its name, legend says, comes from the Virgin Mary, who spread her blue cloak on a white-flowered bush, turning the flowers blue. It is the herb of remembrance, used in weddings and funerals alike. The gardener uses it fresh, snipping sprigs for roasting meat and dried for winter stews. Here grows the calendula, the pot marigold, its bright orange petals like captured sun. The petals dried and added to salves and ointments. The gardener harvests them daily, spreading the petals on a screen in the shade to dry slowly, preserving their color and their virtue. Here grows the sage for wisdom and for savory dishes, the thyme for courage and for flavor, the mint for cooling drinks and for settling the stomach, the feverfew for headaches, the yarrow for wounds, the elecampane for coughs. Each plant has its purpose, its story, its virtue. The gardener knows them all, not from books, but from the accumulated knowledge of generations, passed down by word and touch. In this corner, the garden is a quiet physician, offering its remedies without charge, asking only to be tended with care. The apothecary's harvest, drying and preserving as summer progresses. The apothecary corner demands its own harvest. The gardener cuts the flowering tops of the herbs, choosing the moment when their essential oils are at their peak, usually just before the flowers fully open. He gathers them in the morning, after the dew has dried But before the sun is too hot, he brings them to the shed, where he has prepared for this season's work. He ties the herbs in small bundles and hangs them from the rafters: lavender, sage, rosemary, thyme, mint. They swing gently in the breeze from the open door, filling the shed with their mingled scents. He lays flower petals on screened calendula, chamomile, roasted dry slowly in the warm, shaded air. Later, when the herbs are fully dry and brittle, he will strip the leaves from the stems and store them in labeled clay pots or paper packets. He will make tinctures by steeping herbs in spirits. He will infuse oils for salves. He will mix his own remedies, drawing on recipes learned from the infirmary, from the traveling herbalist, from his own grandmother. This is the quiet, cumulative work of healing, as patient and unhurried as the garden itself. The fruits of summer, abundance, and its management as summer deepens toward its end. The garden reaches its peak of abundance. The tomato vines are now heavy with ripening fruit, red, yellow, striped, in every shape and size. The zucchini are producing so prolifically that the gardener can barely keep up. The beans hang in thick clusters. The peppers are turning from green to red and gold. The eggplants are glossy and purple. This is the time of preserving, of preparing for the scarcity of winter. The gardener works alongside the women of the house in this effort. Tomatoes are cooked down into thick sauces and packed into jars, sealed with a layer of olive oil. Beans are dried on screens in the sun, rattling in their pods when fully dry. Zucchini are sliced and dried or pickled in brine with herbs. Peppers are strung on thread into long, colorful ristras and hung to dry in the kitchen. The work is constant, but it is satisfying. Every jar filled, every string of peppers hung, every bundle of dried herbs is a small victory against the coming cold, a promise of flavor and health when the garden sleeps. The gardens. Visitors, a community of care. The garden is not the gardeners alone. Throughout the summer, it attracts visitors who share in its abundance and contribute to its life. The bees, of course, are constant visitors, and the gardener tends them too, in hives set against the warmest wall. He knows each hive, knows the temperament of its queen, knows when to harvest honey and when to leave them to their work. The honey he harvests is golden, perfumed with the flowers of the garden thyme honey, lavender honey, wildflower honey, each with its own distinct character. Birds visit for water and for insects, and the gardener tolerates their pecking at the ripest fruits, knowing they repay him by eating caterpillars and aphids. He leaves a few berries for them, a small tithe. Neighbors come to the gate, asking for a handful of herbs for a sick child, or a few vegetables to supplement their own meager gardens. The gardener always shares, knowing that the garden's abundance is not meant to be hoarded, but distributed. This is the old way, the way of community, of mutual aid. What you have, you share. Next year, you may be the one in need. The evening gatherings, garden as living space in the long, warm evenings of high summer. The garden becomes a living space, an extension of the home. After the day's work is done, the family may gather on the stone bench near the fountain. The children play at chasing fireflies. The adults talk quietly of the day's events, of plans for tomorrow, of memories of summers past. The scents of the garden are strongest in the evening, the jasmine on the wall. The nicotiana that opens only at night, the sweet herb called lemon balm. The fountain's gentle trickle provides a constant, soothing background. The light fades slowly, imperceptibly, the sky turning from gold to rose to deep violet. The first stars appear in these moments. The garden fulfills its second purpose, to soothe the soul, to provide a place of peace and connection, to remind those who sit within its walls that there is more to life than labor and commerce. Here, in the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the living evidence of growth and beauty, the heart can rest. The first signs of change, the shift in light, but even in the height of summer. There are signs for those who know how to read them. The quality of the light begins to change, almost imperceptibly. The sun sets a little earlier each evening. The mornings are slightly cooler. The angle of the light becomes more golden, more slanted, casting longer shadows. The gardener notices these signs, though he does not remark upon them. He feels them in his body, in the slight shift in his daily rhythms. He knows, with the deep, unconscious knowledge of one who lives by the seasons, that summer will not last forever. The wheel is turning. Autumn, the gathering inand. Then, unmistakably, autumn arrives. Not with a dramatic event, but with a gradual, gentle shift. The air has a new quality, crisper, cleaner, with a hint of the coming chill. The leaves on the trees begin to show color, a touch of yellow, here, a hint of red, there. The garden's pace slows. The gardener's work changes again. Now it is about harvesting, about bringing in, about storing up for the winter. But it is also about letting go, about accepting that the season of growth is ending, that the plants that have given so much will soon wither and die. The final harvests, he harvests the last of the beans. The final, blushing tomatoes that have clung to the vines through the first cool nights. He picks the last zucchini, smaller now, less. He pulls the onions and garlic, laying them on screens in the sun to cure their papery skins, drying to a golden brown. He cuts the great blue-green heads of cabbage, heavy and solid. He harvests the pumpkins and winter squash, their skins now hard enough to store for months. He piles them in a corner of the shed, checking them for any sign of softness or rot. He harvests the leeks, the parsnips, the carrots that have sweetened in the cool soil, the seed, saving a promise to the future. Most importantly, he saves seeds. He has watched certain plants all season, marking the ones that grew strongest, that bore the most fruit, that showed the best resistance to disease. Now, from these chosen plants, he collects the seeds. He splits open a tomato, scoops out the gelatinous seeds, and spreads them on a piece of parchment to dry. He shakes the dried bean pods, listening for the rattle that means the seeds inside are ready. He cuts the flower heads of the marigolds and calendula, spreading them on screens to release their seeds. He labels each batch carefully, noting not just the type of plant, but its qualities: early carrot, sweet, large-leaved basil, very fragrant red tomato, good keeper. These seeds are not just for next year. They are a promise, a continuity, a link between this season and all the seasons to come. As long as the seeds are saved, the garden, in some sense, never dies. The cleanup, preparing for rest when the last harvest is in. The gardener begins the long, slow process of cleaning up. He pulls up the spent plants, the tomato vines, brown and withered, the bean plants, stripped of their leaves, the zucchini, collapsed and rotting. He piles them on the compost heap, layering green with brown, adding a sprinkle of lime to aid decomposition. Nothing is wasted. Everything returns to the earth. He cuts back the perennials, the lavender, the sage, the rosemary, giving them a light pruning to shape them and encourage fresh growth in spring. He mulches their roots with straw, protecting them from the worst of the winter cold. He digs up the tender bulbs, the dahlias, the canazand, stores them in boxes of dry sand in the cellar, where they will sleep through the winter, safe from frost. The autumn colors a final beauty even as the garden prepares for sleep. It offers a final, breathtaking display of beauty. The leaves of the fruit trees turn the pear to a rich gold, the apple to a mottled red and yellow. The vine on the wall, whether grape or Virginia creeper, blazes in shades of crimson and orange. The last flowers, the hardy marigolds, the late asters, the chrysanthemums, provide spots of bright color against the fading green dot. The gardener pauses in his work to appreciate this beauty. He knows it is fleeting, that a single hard frost could strip the leaves and blacken the flowers. But for now, in this golden interval, the garden is more beautiful than it has been all year, not in spite of its approaching death, but because of it. The colors of autumn are the colors of completion, of a life fully lived, of a season's work brought to a beautiful close. The first frost, the turning point then. One morning, the gardener wakes to find the garden transformed. A light frost has settled during the night, coating every leaf and stem in a delicate rime of white. In the early light, it sparkles like diamonds, but it is a killing frost. The tender plants, the basil, the tomatoes, the zucchini are blackened and limp. Their season is over. The gardener walks through the garden, assessing the damage. He is not sad. This, expected, necessary. The frost is the signal that the garden's work is truly done. He pulls the blackened plants and adds them to the compost. He covers the remaining tender roots with extra mulch. He accepts. The putting to bed, a loving ritual now, comes the final, loving ritual, putting the garden to bed. The gardener spreads a thick layer of straw over the most vulnerable beds, protecting the soil from the worst of the winter's freeze and thaw. He mulches around the base of the fruit trees with compost, feeding them for next year's growth. He cleans and sharpens his tools one last time, oiling the metal to prevent rust, hanging them carefully in the shed. He empties the rain barrel and turns it over so ice will not crack it. He closes the shed door and latches it. He walks the paths one final time, not to work, but to say goodbye. The garden is bare now, the beds empty and orderly, but he knows that beneath the surface, life continues. The bulbs are sleeping. The roots are resting. The seeds are waiting. The compost is working its slow, chemical magic. The garden is not dead. It is only dreaming. And then, one evening, you find him simply sitting on the old stone bench, warmed by the last of the autumn day's sun. His tools are cleaned and stored. The harvest is in, the seeds saved, the beds mulched. The earth is settling into its long winter sleep. He is not thinking of the work, done though it has been considerable. He is not planning the work to come, though that will come in its own time. He is simply present, fully, completely, peacefully present in this single moment. He watches a late butterfly, tattered and slow, stumble on the cooling breeze. It lands on a single, late-blooming marigold, the only spot of orange in the muted landscape, and rests there, wings opening and closing slowly. The gardener watches without judgment, without the need to identify or understand. He simply witnesses. He listens to the rustle of a hedgehog in the dry leaves at the wall's base. The small creature is busy, preparing its own winter nest, gathering leaves and moss. Its snuffling, rustling progress is the only sound in the quiet garden. Other than the soft whisper of the breeze, he smells the cold, clean scent of the coming night, mixed with the last fading ghost of rosemary from the bush beside the bench. The air has a different quality, now sharp, mineral, anticipatory. It smells of earth and wood smoke and the distant promise of snow. In this profound quiet, there is a deep and wordless understanding. The gardener, in all his years of bending and planting and weeding and harvesting, has learned something that cannot be taught, only experienced. He has learned that he did not create this life. He was not its author, its origin, its master. He was its custodian, its facilitator, its patient attendant. He provided the conditions, the prepared soil, the water, the protection from pests, the timely harvest stand, the miracle unfolded on its own. Through forces far older and wiser than he, the seed carried within itself the blueprint of the plant. The sun provided the energy. The rain provided the moisture. The soil provided the nutrients. The bees provided the pollination. The gardener provided the attention, the daily, patient, loving attention that allowed the miracle to happen without interference, without forcing, without hurry. This is the gardener's deepest wisdom, that growth cannot be commanded, only encouraged. That life cannot be controlled, only supported. That the highest skill is not doing, but being present while the doing happens through forces beyond our control. For you, listening now in your own quiet space, let this garden be a metaphor for the mind. Your thoughts, your worries, your hopes, your memories, they are all seeds and plants in the garden of your consciousness. Some thoughts, like the chamomile, are soothing and gentle. They need to be encouraged, allowed to flower, harvested for their calming virtue. Some thoughts, like the vigorous mint, can spread too quickly, taking over if not contained. They need to be gently pruned back, kept in their place. Some thoughts, like the deep-rooted perennials, return season after season, shaping the very structure of your inner landscape. They need to be understood, appreciated, perhaps redirected, but not fought. Some thoughts are like weed, persistent, opportunistic, drawing energy away from more desirable growth. They need to be gently, patiently removed, not with anger, but with the calm, persistent attention of the gardener. And some thoughts, like the sleeping seeds in winter, need the deep, quiet darkness to germinate. They cannot be forced into the light before their time. They need the fallow period, the rest, the unconscious gestation that happens when we are not actively thinking. When we are sleeping or dreaming or simply resting, the garden teaches that there is a time for every activity and a time for rest, a time for planting and a time for harvesting, a time for vigorous growth and a time for peaceful dormancy. And sometimes the wisest, most productive thing we can do is to simply sit on the bench, in the evening of our own consciousness, and watch the garden of our mind settle into its own rhythms. Without any need to interfere, to direct, to improve, the gardener has gone inside now. The heavy wooden door in the wall has been closed and latched for the night. The moon is rising over the silent, sleeping plots, its pale light silvering the straw mulch and the bare branches of the fruit trees. The last scent of basil, that warm, peppery, summery scent, has faded from the air. The compost heap continues its slow, invisible work, turning waste into future richness. The earth breathes slowly, deeply, patiently, dreaming of the spring that will surely come. Though it is months away, the garden rests. The gardener rests. The whole beautiful, cyclical world of green, of growth and decay, of planting and harvest, of life and death, and life and life again, and life, and now. You can let your own internal garden rest, too. There's no more tending to be done tonight. No more problems to solve. No more worries to weed. No more hopes to water. No more memories to prune. Just the gentle, silent fallow of sleep. The deep, dark, fertile soil of the unconscious, where the seeds of tomorrow's thoughts germinate in a warmth of your own hidden depths, where renewal happens without any effort on your part, without any conscious direction, without any need for you to do anything at all. The gate is latched. The tools are still. The gardener sleeps. The garden dreams, and so can you. The sound of the well bucket has long since faded. The bees are silent. The only remaining sound is the gentle, rhythmic trickle of the fountain. The one element that never rests, that continues its soothing murmur through all seasons, day and night. It plays on, a lullaby for the sleeping garden, for 30 seconds. The fountain continues alone, its sound slowly becoming softer, more distant, as if the listener is drifting away from it on a gentle current. Then it too fades, gradually, imperceptibly, until it merges into a silence that is not empty, but full. Full of the memory of summer bees. Full of the scent of lavender and rosemary. Full of the patient, waiting presence of seeds in winter soil. Full of the deep, restorative peace of a world that knows how to rest, and in resting prepares for all the springs to come.